Hello, and welcome back to the next episode of this series, level design series for looking at pipeline processes. So, in this episode, I'm going to show you guys some basic stuff to do with Quixel. Certainly, this is going to be very useful to people that are new to Quixel, haven't used it before, and are interested in how you can kind of make stuff in here and how that will then come across to Unreal. So this is the opening screen that you get when you kind of open it. It's free to download and it's free to use with a login of Unreal. Sorry, an Epic license, I should say. And like maybe I think just over a year ago, you could use Unreal without having to sign into it, but now you do anyway. So if you're using Unreal, you'll already have a sign in, and you can use that over here. And Quixel and Epic teamed up. Epic now own Quixel, and as a result, all the stuff that used to be, used to pay for, is now completely free, which is fantastic. So you can use all that great stuff inside of your scenes, inside of your maps and levels, inside of Unreal. There is another piece of software that comes with Quixel. So when you download that, pretty sure it might be one of those tick options where it's like, do you want to also download Bridge? And by all means you can do that. Bridge is great. It's got a lot of the different. It's got all the different mixes in there ready for you. So Quixel Mixer allows you to kind of mix things together, whereas you can come in here and there's a lot of different assets and you'll be able to send those across. So like I experimented once with this, so I made something in Mixer and I exported it out to Bridge, just a simple Rust texture, and then once it's inside Bridge, you can then send that across to Unreal. You have to set up a couple of things beforehand in terms of like what engine version you've got and the installation folder, and then the project location. But once you export it, that will put it directly into your Unreal project, which is great. We're not going to do it that way, simply because that does it all for you. Sets up all the materials, and I think it's useful to be able to show people how to set up the materials themselves. By all means, after you've looked at this, check this out. If you prefer to do it this way, that is absolutely fine. But I'm going to do it in slightly, I suppose, the more manual way, and so you guys can see what's going on. So I'm just going to close that down and come back over to Quixel Mixer, and I'll go ahead and create a new mix. So I'm going to create a wall texture for the white boxing scene map that I was working on in the last episode. So I'll just call it wall, and it'll probably be, well, I don't know what it's going to be yet, so I'll just leave it as wall. Click OK. 2K texture is kind of fine for what we're doing, so that's fine. And then what I'll do is I'll just see, have I got any nice bricks? Got some brick stuff here. Let's see what we've got online. So if I just type in brick there and hit enter and just search, looking kind of for an inside one really. So we've got some of the 3D model bits coming up there as well, which is quite nice. So inside, what should I go for? That might look quite nice. Yeah, that'd be okay. So I'll click download. It might not even look like this once we finish doing it. So I'm just going to download this texture so it appears in kind of my library. So this is kind of going to download it onto your actual computer so you can use it inside of your mixers. I've got some things downloaded already, and some of these also came preloaded when you download the software. So not all of these have been downloaded, but some have. So how are we getting on with that texture? Yep, it's there. Cool. So there we go. That should have it there for us. Brilliant. Okay, so by default, I'm going to come into this setup tab, even though it's the second one, and that's all fine. Those are all the settings. We could adjust the resolution if we wanted to, even though we kind of set it when we set up a new document. We can change it there, but we'll leave it at that for the time being. So I'll come over to our layers tab, and you can see that our brick facade, is it? is is already in the scene. So we've got two layers. We've got the base layer here, and if I hide that, obviously that will show everything nice on our brick facade. And the reason why if we show that there is because as part of this process, as part of kind of creating these mixes, you have the option of changing, the height on things in terms of like where they appear in relation to each other. So by default, this is set to a blend of from below, opacity is completely full, and then we've got this slider here, this threshold that will actually allow us to change that. So I can lift this up, and that's now going to lift that above that base layer. If I go the other way, it's going to bring it down below it. Okay, so obviously we don't want that. So I'm going to lift it just above it. So you've got that coming in just there, and that's fine. We've got some other tweaks that we can make here as well. So radius, that's not going to make a massive amount of difference at the moment to what we're doing. It's changing the kind of the lower areas of the so it's almost kind of interacting with the normal map there, and allowing it to kind of again flush through that base layer there. As you can see, as I move that up, it's coming through slightly. So again, we've got these different sliders that we can manipulate to try and get the aesthetic that we want. Okay, so if you want a little bit of grey coming through, that's fine. I think I can go to the base color and change that. So say for example, if we wanted that to be like just a very simple kind of bright white, maybe slightly off, something like that, and we wanted that to actually be prevalent within our mix, then that's fine. So just have it come through a little bit. Obviously that's a bit too much. Something there perhaps. And then we haven't got any details to preserve yet because we've just done our first layer, so that's fine. We're up to underlying again. Not going to do very much at this stage, or blur underlining because we haven't got those different things in there. We've got placement in here, so we can it's automatically set it up as tiling, but we can set to freeform, which for this won't do very much, or box projection, and that's changed it slightly, and we can change the angle and the tilt of how that's projecting onto that. We're okay with tiling though for the time being. Useful to come and click up here as well, preview tiling, to sort of see how that will filter out if you are applying it to something where you want it to kind of repeat, if you want it to have a tiling pattern, to have that kind of element of modularity within that. And you can tell it to tile in different ways, so we could tile just on the X or tile on the Y. And if we tile on the X but then change those repetitions, that's what's happening there. Or tile on the Y, and you can see that's obviously changing those things. Okay, but we'll put it back to tile. We can offset it on the X or on the Y, Control Z just to go back on those. Rotate it round 90 degrees. We can also reset the tiling if we've made some changes, and it's just easy to go back that way. And then we have all of the, we've got height frequency as well. So this will, if I zoom in here, we can really bring out the height on this, and then we can really lower down those kind of lower areas underneath it, if that makes sense. So you can really see the bricks coming through now in a much more intense way. So again, more sliders to play around with in terms of trying to achieve those aesthetics that you're going for. But I'm happy with that there. So what I'll do to this is I will add some more details to this. So let's add another one on here. Some birch. Dried grass. Grass on stones. That's not going to quite work. That might work quite well. So some stone wall coming through. And again, if we scroll up to the top here, we've got it coming from below. So if we just change that threshold and lift that up slightly, like so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch that up as well so I can come back to what it's supposed to look like here. There we go. Just navigate around that. So I'm using the scroll wheel to zoom in and out, and I'm using the clicking Alt on the keyboard and left clicking to move around it that way. You can also hold down Alt and right click, and that will zoom in and out as well that way for you. And if you hold down the middle mouse button, that will pan around the object for you as well. Okay, so I'm definitely going to, what I'm going to try and do here is I'm going to want it to come through ever so slightly, and then what I want to do is I want to try and see if I can get just the little bits coming through in places just by toggling these off. That's quite nice. Repetitions are 2, so I'm going to turn that down on those bits just to make it a little bit more blocked. There we go. That's nice. And what we can also do is if we come to the albedo just here and drop this down, this is obviously a different color palette to the one that we find on here. I can actually try and match to the underlying. So if I just pull this up here, you can see the color starts to change now, and that is matching the color that's underneath, which is kind of very useful. Just like that. And then let's look, we've got contrast there as well. That's quite cool. Yeah, so stay to about there. So I'm just trying to create this like really rough looking wall essentially. And it's probably a little bit too intense in some areas. So what I'm also going to do on this one is I'm going to I'm going to paint a mask on this, similar to what we would do in Photoshop, where we're going to apply, we're going to paint the areas that we don't want. So over here, my value is set to black, which again, exactly the same as Photoshop, will mean that those areas are not visible. We also have the option over here to change the kind of the view that we're looking at. So this is PBR metalness, that's the whole thing put together. We can just look at the albedo, the metalness for the object, or the layer mask, just there, which is obviously how that's coming through, or the active mask. So if I just go back to PBR metalness for a second here, go to the paint, and then what I'll do is I'm going to start taking out some of that detail just there. So I'm just masking that out. I've noticed in some of the more recent Quixel updates as well, the quality in terms of what we're seeing here, this preview, has dropped slightly. So you're not going to get the full picture, shall we say, in terms of what this will actually look like once you pop it back into Unreal. Sorry. So just taking some bits out. We can change the brushes as well if you wanted to. I'm just using a soft edge brush at the moment. But we can change it to some of these bits if you wanted to. If you wanted to be more specific with a square or whatnot. But this one's working fine for what I'm doing. And I'm not really trying to necessarily achieve anything specific, other than just trying to, I suppose, make this not quite look quite as busy as what it did before. Come up that bit there as well, and then maybe just something in the middle there. There's certainly, it's definitely about trying to find a fine balance, because we're going to kind of tile this a little bit across the wall in our scene, and so you want to kind of add detail in there, but you don't want that detail to be too recognizable. Otherwise, it's very obvious when you look at that asset within the scene, within the level, but it is just a pattern that's repeating over and over again. So it's about trying to find that balance. But obviously that's a great thing about doing this digitally, because if it doesn't quite work the first time, then you can come back in and try and play around with that. And that's also again why this option is really useful with preview tiling, just to see how it's going to look across something. So it doesn't look too bad. I think we can get away with that. Like, just rather than taking it out completely, just soften that a little bit. So not completely taking it out, just softening it a tiny bit. Great stuff. Okay, So I've got my mask showing there, which is cool. So jump back onto my material, just like that. That takes that menu away. I think that's kind of roughly all right for what we're trying to go for. We don't really need like any kind of decals, which would be things like kind of debris and plants and stuff like that. I suppose we could, and then perhaps have like a little bit of mold growing through in some places, I guess. Um, I, yes, we don't want that in there. Add that in. And this one is set to, rather than kind of the from below, and there's also an option from above, we've just got opacity mask this time. So if we just change that opacity down, that would change that for us. But I'll see what happens when I switch it back to view below, and then just try and lift that up. Just so it's coming through a little bit in some places. Just so it's a bit grimy. And then what I'll do is, again, with that one, just because I can, I'll put another mask on that one and just take those bits out there that are coming through. Brilliant. And then I'll come back over here and I might change that so it's a bit darker as well. Like so. Okay. Cool. This, you've got an interesting, the liquid layer is a good one, because it will allow you to kind of make a surface look like, well, there's water on it. And we probably don't want that because this is going up on the wall. But it's nice pointing out, especially for like floor surfaces or kind of muddy areas, for example. And again, we can mask aspects of that out. We can change, how prevalent that is. If I turn it up actually the way there, and you can sort of see the surface or the depth can be also moved across and these areas. So there's some great stuff there. We're not going to use that for this, but it's nice to point out that there is that option there. Adding noise to this as well. So really kind of, if we wanted a brick wall that essentially looked, very, very weathered, it's been there for a long time, we can play around with these noise sliders here, just to kind of change again that appearance of that wall. If I just switch on what that will look like with displacement as well, you can see that's obviously really changed that. We're not going to play around with displacement at this point inside Unreal, just because it's another sort of thing, and it doesn't always work incredibly well as well, unless you're using really high kind of resolution textures. So we're talking 8K textures to really bring that detail through. So that's why I've got that turned off automatically. But with that turned off, you can see that it's still trying, some of that detail is still trying to come through because it's still taking advantage of the fact that we've got a normal map associated with these different layers here, where that detail can be tried to apply to. And if you're not familiar with a normal maps are simply a way of creating like the illusion of depth and bumps and details, sometimes called bump maps instead of normal maps. And it's just about using sort of texture information to create that illusion of depth rather than actually trying to model it on something, which will kind of cost a lot of vertices or polygons that can become quite computationally expensive. So normal maps are used, they're used a lot. They're used, any kind of video game you've been playing recently would definitely take advantage of using normal maps for some of the detail. So yeah, I'm not going to worry too much about that. I might just add a couple of bits, but yeah, nothing too intense. Cool. Okay, all right. So I've roughly got what I think I want now. So what I need to do is I need to go to the Export tab just at the top here, and I've got the location. I've got the name of it. So I've got wall. I'll just call it like, yeah, I did go for a brick in the end. Brick old. There we go. And I've chosen the export location. So this location here is again where I was doing the white boxing stuff in the previous episode, and this location will basically put the materials directly into the content folder, which is really cool. So I mean, it's very easy to export things out from Quixel. I mean, you could just put it on somewhere, you know, where you want to save it, like somewhere else on your hard drive or whatever. But actually, if you want to make this sort of super easy in terms of like your workflow and pipeline, then you can just put it directly. You can find the location of where your project is and put it straight into there. I suppose, you know, you might want to just put it, you might not want to put it there. You might want to put it on your hard drive if, um, you know, you've got multiple projects and you think, well, I might end up using these materials again for different projects. So you might do it for that, but then, you know, at the same time, I'm thinking you could then probably just copy the materials from this location anyway, if that was the case, and put it in your other project. So, but yeah, so whatever works best for you, but obviously this is the way that I'm setting it up because it makes it a little bit easier, again, in terms of that pipeline. Ticking the option to create a subfolder, so anything I export won't just export the materials, it will export them inside of a subfolder, which will be called wall brick old. You can choose to add the resolution to the name if you want to, rather than sort of typing it in and then open the folder after export, that's fine. So this is all good. So every time you come into Quixel Mixer and you want to export something, it will give you the maps that it thinks you'll probably want to export. Okay, I say that, it knows that I'm following a PBR metalness workflow because it gave me that option at the start of it when I clicked on new mix, yet it doesn't have metalness ticked, which is a little bit strange. So we do want that. We won't always necessarily use our ambient occlusion map, especially if it's just like a surface texture like this, because we'll just kind of we'll probably take advantage of the lighting that's already going on inside the level for that. But it doesn't hurt to have it just in case, you know, because it might be that you do want it. It might be that it is useful. As I mentioned before, we're not going to look at displacement just yet, so I'm going to remove that map. I'm going to keep the normal, I'm going to keep the roughness. We don't want gloss, we don't want specular, and albedo and diffuse are basically the same, but again, albedo will be for a metalness workflow and diffuse is normally used with a specular workflow. We're using a metalness workflow, so that means that we'll remove that map. Okay, don't worry too much about the metalness and specular workflow for the time being. We'll be sort of perhaps talking about that in some of the upcoming videos. But yeah, ultimately it's just a different set of textures depending on what workflow you're using and how they then get put together when you're using them inside things like Unreal. So I've got those all set up there. Now what I can do before I export this is I can save this if I wanted to. Like, so this is, you know, I'm going to commonly use this setup. So I could go to here and you can see I've already got that set up and I've got UE4 in there already, which is cool. So you know, for you guys, you could just click on Save Preset. And if I just type in UE4 again, it'll just be like, there's already one. Do you want to replace it? Yeah, it's fine. So you could have that, and that just means that, you know, every time you come in, rather than having to sort of manually change all those, you can just go to that and just click on it, and it will load it from there. You could also, if I add a map, if we do get to that point where we do use displacement, displacement, and displacement. Yeah. So if we are using like displacement as well, I can now go in and go save preset, and I'll call this one UE4 plus D. Save that, and now I know, you know, if I want to export it, it's just standard Unreal stuff. I click on that, or if I want to have it with the displacement as well, I click on that. It'll pull it open for me. Okay, so let's go UE4 and export 5 maps. And that will now send it to that location. So I can minimize this down and head over to Unreal. So you can see it pops up and says 5 changes to source content files have been detected. Would you like to import them? Yes, please. So I'll just click on import. Let that process through. It will also say texture wall brick old normal was imported as a normal map. Is this okay? Absolutely. Just because it's a slightly different setup for that So it'll always ask you that question, but you always want to click OK on that one. So let's have a look. So we're looking at wall, brick, old just here. And there are the 5 different maps that I exported, the 5 different textures that were exported from Quixel. Okay. So when we did the white boxing, we were able to kind of just add the material down there by dragging it on. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't work. I don't think it worked very well for me in the last video, but you would normally just be able to drag the texture straight onto it. Okay. The manual way of doing it is if you come over to your textures, and what we want to do is we want to right click on our albedo. So just to quickly go through what these are, the albedo map is essentially what you can see. So it's the actual the kind of the pixel information, what you'll physically be able to see actually within the scene. So that's the albedo. What contributes towards this though is ambient occlusion, or AO. That will help the material understand where the kind of the shadowed areas are, where the crevices are perhaps, and where it's like lit up a little bit better perhaps, and that can be manipulated if you know what you're doing in terms of how that material will look. You've then got your metalness, which is essentially how metallic a texture will look. So you're going to obviously have some occasions where you want to have a look at a surface that looks really metallic, like the side of something metallic, of course, like a fire extinguisher, or a pipe or something. As you can see at the moment, that's completely black, which will tell our material that there is nothing metal about this particular texture. Our normal, which is what I mentioned a little bit ago in Quixel Mixer about kind of creating an illusion of depth. So if I come into here, you can see that we've got that kind of that brick. So it's like the brick texture that we see in the albedo, but it's a different set of colors, and those colors help systems like Unreal understand where to create the depth within that texture. So again, it's kind of that creating that illusion again of the bumps. And then finally we have our roughness, which works in tandem with our metalness texture just here. And you can see that's the kind of the areas, the different colors that it's highlighting. Again, it will jump between black and white. So that's its spectrum, and between those different variations, that will help support again the material understand what areas are going to be rougher than others. And you'll notice from here that tends to be the areas it's picked out in the roughness are the areas where we brought the extra texture through, that kind of like popped through the back of the bricks almost, and that's where that's most prevalent on that bit. So so that's basically how those 5 textures work and what they're doing. So I'll right click on the first one and go to create material, hit enter to confirm, because the naming convention's fine that it's got, which is like wall underscore brick underscore old. I could specify that I wanted that wall brick old to have a T at the end of it to signify that it was a texture, which is also, it's good practice. So I mean, in theory, I probably should have done that, but I'm happy with the way this material has come out, because it's exactly the same naming convention, except at the end of it, it's just got the word matte to signify that this is a material. So I'll double click on that to open that up, and you can see that this has been plugged in to our material node. So our texture has been plugged into our material node just here. So I'm just going to drag that tab across there so I can see both of them. I'm going to hit Control on the keyboard and select all of these, and then click and drag them up to this tab, and then release them inside of here so that I can just drag those across, just space them out so I can see what's going on. So this one is the ambient occlusion. So I plug the RGB into ambient occlusion, like so. This one is a normal map, so I plug that into the normal pin, just there. This one looks like it's going to be the metal, the metalness, so this one gets plugged into the metallic. So slightly different name there, but not too different. And then finally, this one will be plugged into, so this one is the roughness. This will get plugged into the roughness at the top there as well. So if I zoom in there, you can see it says roughness just there. Okay, and you can see it has a pin for specular, which is one of the map options that we had beforehand, but it doesn't have one for gloss. That's because Unreal supports a metalness workflow better than a specular workflow. I believe you probably could just plug the gloss into, I can't remember top of my head if you plug it into metallic or roughness, but you kind of plug it in and then you add like a different node to it as well to sort of make it do its job. So you can do it. You can kind of get Unreal to follow a specular workflow by using specular and gloss instead of metalness and roughness. But if you have the option of metalness and roughness, then why bother? So there we go, they're all plugged in now, and you'll hopefully have seen as we were plugging those different bits in, the preview that we get up here has changed to reflect that. So if I, for example, take out the roughness and the metallic, just holding down Alt on the keyboard and clicking those, and then take out the normal map, you'll see it starts to look a little bit different. But again, I'll plug those in, so metallic, roughness, and normal, and it will slightly change the model for us. The texture preview. So I'll click apply and click save, and then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to come into the building here where I've still got these walls that haven't got anything on them yet, and I'm just going to simply drag that onto that one, like so. Just let it compile for a second, onto that one, onto that one, and onto that one. Okay, so it's very, very small at the moment. It's super, super tiled. So try and do a couple of things to sort of help improve this. First off, I'll select all of the walls and I'll align them. So go alignment and wall. That's aligning up with each other quite nicely, but hasn't done too much in terms of spacing out. So that's not a problem. We can do something else. We can come back into the material, just up here. And we can right click and type in texture coordinate and find it there. Or the shortcut for it, if you like your shortcuts, is just to hold down U and click. So that's the letter U, and then click. And I'm just going to plug that into all the UVs of all these different texture samples. So just as the same thing to all of them. And I need to make it bigger. So I need to go. So you would think that by changing the value of this, you'd hope that by scaling that up, that would make it so that the textures multiplied less because the texture was becoming bigger. It's not quite the same. You're actually changing how the UV tiling is. So you're actually dividing it the more that you're kind of putting the number higher. So if I change this instead to, let's try 0.25. 0.25. So that's kind of going opposite way. So I'm sort of multiplying it by 4 then because I'm quartering it. So let's click apply. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that's like looking much better in terms of it's a more practical size. I'm just going to hit play. And there we go. Put on the walls nicely. Excellent. Happy with that? So it's looking a bit dirty in places, a little bit of like black mold coming through. And what we could also do with this, guys, is if we wanted to, is we could, just because I'm mindful those bits are in line with those bits. Again, so this is the detail I was talking about earlier in terms of seeing that repeating again and again. To try and mix it up a little bit, what we could do is on here, we could come back, because this is still set up as geometry. I haven't converted it to a static mesh yet in this version. So we can come down here and we can actually pan the texture, which is quite useful. I still want the lines to line up. So let's work out. So that's the smallest division is there. So let's try it 64. Okay, so if we come down one, I've missed it on that one. That one looks like it might work okay though. Is that alright? Or have I just in a full circle? I've just gone round robin. Nope, that's fine. So that looks a little bit different now. Cool, that's fine. And again, we can do the same thing over here. So I'll try and come down just in smaller multiples this time, so I just have to come down one. That works on that join, but I don't think it works on the rest of the joins. I'll come down. There we go. Cool. So again, another kind of useful tool, another kind of bit of functionality that can add to the kind of aesthetics of a level that you're going for. And I'll just come in again. You may have noticed that I turned off the ability for the gun to fire as well, just because in my last video I pointed out that it was a little bit annoying when it kept going off. Yeah, that's nice. I'm happy with that. There's still some, again, I could perhaps make some changes to the fact that that's repeating 3 times along that bit. But for just a little demonstration on how we can pull stuff through, that is all good. You can see the floor was also done in Quixel Mixer, so you might be able to also see there's a tiny bit of water on there as well to obviously signify that that is it's a little bit wet. I've done another texture over here as well, which is a little bit more kind of muddy and mossy. There's some puddles in it. I've also created in Quixel, and then finally there's a road just over here as well, with some white road strips. There you go, get my words out, in the middle there as well for that bit. Okay, and we've just done that by essentially grabbing that, which was a plane, and you can see that we've scaled it 100 times on that side. So originally it would look like this. So that's for the texture on it, like so. But then all we've done is we've just changed it so that, well, I'll just press Ctrl Z to go back, and you can see that's what it looks like with it spaced over that area. Okay, so that's the basics of how we can get different textures from Mixer, mix them together, and we can add them then into software like the Unreal Engine. Cool. I hope this episode was useful to you guys, and I shall see you next time. Thanks for watching.